I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but in about 6 months' time, the world is going to be a completely different place. And no, I don't mean because of the obvious. Rather, because there will be not one, but multiple credible competitors in both range and, wait for it, design against the Tesla Model Y. Now, about 2 weeks ago, you and I looked at the first of the bunch from Nissan. So it's high time that we look at one from Europe, and no, it's not this one, but it is sort of related in kind of a distant cousin way. So a little housekeeping to level set expectations. Today, you and I are driving a production intent early prototype of a Volkswagen ID4. That is a coming mid-size crossover that has a full electric propulsion system. Now, I got very limited time with this car, so I do not have it in the hangar. So all our discussions here will have this lovely stand-in that is not an EV propulsion system. Anyway, what you are looking at today is the first in the Volkswagen brand that will rest on the MEB platform. So remember we talked about MQB that used to underpin the Golf and small Audis. MEB will underpin small to mid-size electric vehicles within the Volkswagen group. Now, what does this translate to in the Volkswagen brand? The answer being two separate cars. Over in Europe, there's going to be something called the ID3, and think of that as a Golf-sized EV car. And it's not something like we had in the Golf EV where it's a gas car that's been translated into the EV world. This is something that is built on that MEB platform, and one of the specific benefits is how they build it. Like, for example, the structure of the vehicle will be aluminum, but the body panels and the chassis will be steel. And then there is the car you and I are driving today, which will live in Europe as well as the rest of the world, and that is the ID4, if we need to get pedantic, ID.4, and this is a mid-size crossover. But what sets it apart from, say, the Nissan Ariya that we looked at about 2 weeks ago, this will be on offer as both two-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. The first versions that are going to be out to market will be two-wheel drive. But unlike the Ariya, the two-wheel drive will be a rear drive, much like the BMW i3. That's because they are placing the electric motor in the rear of the vehicle, not in the front of the vehicle. And that will be 201 horsepower and 228 pound-feet of torque. Now, there will be a more powerful all-wheel drive vehicle on offer, say, middle to latter part of next year. That's going to be 302 horsepower. And in speaking to one of the Volkswagen engineers, they're targeting that to do better acceleration than a GTI. Being this is an incredibly early look at the ID4, so much so this specific car is a German market vehicle. I don't have the usual mass information to share with you. Suffice it to say, with a lot of batteries and electric motor, this is probably very heavy. With that, that's pretty good. It's not like the normal EV that punches you in the face with instantaneous torque. It's more palatable than that. There's good pulling power from like 30 to 40 miles an hour, but let's switch that up to Sport. There you go, Sport. Push it a little bit more. That said, I can't tell you there is a huge difference between Sport and Comfort mode in terms of acceleration. Either way, it's pretty good. So aside from the propulsion system, what's going on with the underpinnings? And here I wasn't able to get a lot of information out of Volkswagen, so I resorted to literally crawling underneath the car while the car was parked when I was shooting it. And I found that it has a multi-link suspension in the front, a multi-link suspension in the rear. And then very interestingly, it's got disc brakes in the front. And this is a full EV designed on a totally new Flash EV platform that has drum brakes in the rear. I did a little bit of digging on this, and the information I got, the drum brakes are more efficient for the regen in an EV vehicle. I say we put a pin in that discussion because I need to get to a Volkswagen engineer to get the real answer on that. Now, pressing on to dimensions, this is an area where Klaus is borrowing a page out of Brother Alfonso's book from Nissan in optimizing packaging for an EV propulsion system platform. Great example of that is the length and the wheelbase. If you were to look at the length of the vehicle we are driving today, it is almost identical to a current gen ICE RAV4 or Nissan Rogue. In the Volkswagen world, it's a little bit longer than a Tiguan. But wheelbase, that is the huge difference, because that's where you package people and dogs, the business of these types of mid-size crossovers. And here, it's somewhere between 2 and 3 inches longer in wheelbase than anything currently in the ICE world that is about the same competitive segment. And that leaves us with 2 very interesting tidbits. Remember in the Nissan Ariya film, we talked about the difference between a 6.6 and a 7.2 kilowatt charger. Most EVs one can have today have either one of those options. The car we are driving today will have neither. It will be fitted with an 11 kilowatt charger as standard. Now, Volkswagen is saying if you charge it on a level 2 charger, which I have here in the hangar, it'll take about 7.5 hours for a full charge. Which brings us to the second tidbit that happened right before I drove the car. The US government certified the range on this vehicle officially at 250 miles. Driving dynamics are always important in an EV because everything's in a different place. And here, that's generally a good thing, because one would not think to push a mid-size crossover, because at the end of the day, that's what this thing is, this hard. And even pushing it to a point where no owner really would, it's pretty good. Is it the Audi RS6 Avant I left at the Volkswagen dealership to drive this thing? Absolutely not. But it's significantly better than a box standard Tiguan. And the biggest reason I say that is there's good control over pitch from side to side. Squat and dive could use a little work. I have told you guys for years now, I never like to tell you what you can see. So design is always a very difficult discussion to have. And here there are 2 different things going on. In one direction, there is a very conservative approach to design. It is a 2-box design. You can't mistake it for other mid-size crossovers on the road today. However, there are some details that make it stand out as a more modern vehicle, like specifically the front and the back of the vehicle look like something that is more futuristic. It's not as aggressive in design, or frankly as beautiful in design as the Nissan Ariya was. That's more of a jump forward than this was. This is very much a Volkswagen in the paradigm of design, just one that looks a little bit more futuristic. And then there is the functionality of design, which is far more important in an EV than in an ICE for reasons you would not expect. Today, I shot this car in Topanga Canyon, but I picked it up in Santa Monica. So to transport it to and from Topanga Canyon, I went on PCH. And on the ride to and from the shoot location, I could hear more wind noise in this vehicle than, say, in a traditional ICE. Actually, this is the car I drove there today, so I heard no wind noise, just heard the engine. And that's the thing. That's why it's more important in an EV. When you hear the engine, you don't hear the wind as much. And that takes us back to 2010 when the Nissan Leaf came out, which it was ugly. There's no other way to put it. It was downright homely because it had those bug headlights and the weird fairings on the mirrors. But they did that for a specific reason, to channel the air at speed around the vehicle so you wouldn't hear the air rushing around the vehicle. So my suggestion back to Klaus and the designers at Volkswagen, perhaps you should try bug lights or something else to channel the air so you don't hear as much air noise as you drive the car at speed. Steering is a bit of a surprise here. Here I would expect it to be too light, over boosted, and really no feeling. Here there's actually some good weight to it. Is it what you'd expect in a GTI? Absolutely not. But for an EV, it's an unusual point of differentiation where Volkswagen has blessed this with a personality all unto its own, especially as it's going into a market that will have many competitors that don't exist today. If there's anything I can be incredibly pedantic with here, it would be the brakes. The only way to describe them is they're spongy. There's really no good pedal modulation. There's stopping power that's equal to what this vehicle's supposed to be, but it doesn't feel right. Granted, I'm pushing it hard on this road here. It really wasn't meant for, but even around town, it just doesn't have an inspiring pedal feel. I would change that for the final build. Now, believe it or not, we can sort of play a round of our favorite game, the options game, because I was able to get pricing information on a pre-production prototype vehicle. Usually we do not get those two things together, so let's make the most of it. What we are driving today is what is going to be called a Volkswagen ID4 First Edition. So that would tell you this is a special edition marking the introduction of this car. As such, it is more expensive. It is $44,000. It has a number of things that will be offered optionally in the more basic Pro model, which is the standard model. So let's go through that. There is a standard model that will be $40,000, and then you could add something called a statement package. The statement package gives us that panoramic roof, which I don't think opens. Then the illuminated VW logo. Then the powerful mirrors and the adaptive lights. That is $4,500, very odd group of packaging bits. And then there's another package, which you have to get the statement package first to get this one called the Gradient. I do not know where they find these names. That is the 20-inch wheels, the black roof, the silver roof rails. That is an additional $1,500. Now, I cannot share any destination and handling information because they don't have that. The cars currently are all built in Germany. However, starting in 2022, they will be built in what the Germans call Chattanooga. And that leaves us with two rather important money bits. The first has something to do with charging. You see, the folks at Volkswagen tell me that whether one opts for the more basic ID4 Pro or this fancy first edition that we're driving in, just as an aside, the first edition has very special pedals. The gas pedal is a play button and the brake pedal is a pause button. Either way, the vehicle will come with 3 years of unlimited charging. Then there is the business of those pesky rebates. Now, I would like to point out that all the numbers I gave you are from the manufacturer and do not include those rebates. And I specifically do not include rebates or whatever you want to call them because they are not discounts off the price of the vehicle. We will cover in nauseating detail what they are and what they are not in a future episode early next year. The interior is a nice departure for Volkswagen. There's some stuff on the door panels and the top of the dash that definitely remind you of a Tiguan or other Volkswagens. But all of this is a complete departure for the Volkswagen Group. There are some good bits of execution, like the shifter, the stalks, that kind of stuff. However, you guys know I'm a big believer in safety, and following Tesla with no real hard buttons, knobs, or control, that is not a good idea when you're really driving. And forget about driving aggressively like I'm driving now, but around town, you need to pay attention to what's going on in front of you. So how about some knobs here, maybe some control down here instead of everything on this screen? I get what you're trying to do. I understand this is what the cool kids want nowadays, but this, while it's good in design in terms of aesthetics, in terms of UX design, this is not the safest way to go. I would highly suggest adding some different control. A couple of high-level notes. First and foremost, great visibility looking forward, incredible amount of airiness. They've done a lot with the EV platform, which gives you more room, at least the feeling of more room. And then there is the color and trim. Yeah, this is a departure in terms of design, the overall inside of the car, but the color and trim is probably something that stands out the most because it's unusual for a German car in particular. Usually they are very purposeful in their choices of color and trim. Here it's purposeful, but to make it look a little bit more futuristic. I would love to see different themes here, like have the futuristic theme like this one in this first edition, and perhaps go with the old Verbery like a GTI. How about we do that for the all-wheel drive with more horsepower? Yes, this was an incredibly early look at the Volkswagen ID4, yet I would go so far as to saying the car I drove today was pretty good. That said, I do have a wish list. At the absolute top of the wish list, I would like to see some changes in the driving dynamics, and something tells me that's going to be addressed in the coming all-wheel drive model, because Volkswagen seems to like to talk about GTIs and that coming all-wheel drive model in the same breath. We'll have to put a pin in that and come back to that. And then last but not least, please, oh please, oh please, and I've shared this with Nissan, do not make the all-wheel drive a $60,000 vehicle. If it is going to be in competition with a Tesla Model Y, I don't care how attractive this car is, and I do think it is attractive. If it is close in price to the Tesla, most people will buy the Tesla. Now, I am just one man who happens to be a cheapskate offering the exact same advice to Volkswagen as I did to Nissan, which is to stay away from the third rail in the EV world, which is pricing the vehicle too high. That said, anything else we should include on this wish list, let me know in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV all one word, MotoManTV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, a huge vielen Dank to the folks at Volkswagen for giving me early access to where this vehicle is going and the opportunity to provide feedback. Until I see you guys in the next episode, bis später.